exciting about a webinar feature is we can't see everybody's faces and wave and say hi, but I can see you joining us. And we'll give it a few minutes. I'm going to check something real quick. And feel free to say hi in the chat if you want. I mean, that's as close as we can get to real highs at this particular point in time. And Lenora, who is our volunteer coordinator or volunteer training coordinator, is going to help behind the scenes. And Lenora, if you were on, I've just promoted you to panelist so you can help us with some of these features so Julie and I can have a good conversation here.
I like the
love that, Nancy. Yeah, Julie and I don't have that opportunity this time. Well, I don't like everybody to have to just sit there. I'm going to actually, I think, start. We've given a few minutes and people will join when they can. The beginning right now, I'm just going to go over a few announcements and let me officially welcome us to the first annual It's Time Making the End of Life Conference. This had been intended to be an in-person gathering so we could actually begin to talk face-to-face with some of our offerings. But like everybody else in the world, we've had to adjust. And so we're now on this platform, which is a little bit different than what we intended, but I hope you'll find value with it as well. So I am Brenda Kress. I'm the Executive Director of the Sacramento Hospice Consortium. And our members who support these efforts are Sutter Care at Home Roseville, Sutter Care at Home Sacramento, and UC Davis Hospice. These nonprofit hospices work collaboratively, I can't talk this morning, to provide quality volunteer training and ongoing education for the community. And I can see looking at my video, my lips aren't matching my words, so I apologize there if anybody else sees that. So a great deal of gratitude for these nonprofit hospices because it's been rough for them this year too, but they fully support these activities. The Hospice Consortium itself is a nonprofit, 501c3 too, and so we gladly welcome contributions to support our efforts as well. In the future, at the end of this series, I will send out some information on how maybe you can, if you're so called to do so. So at the bottom, some have already figured out the chat feature, and that's fine. That goes out to everybody. If you have a question for Julie or I during this presentation, you can type it into the Q&A box. And when it appears to be a good time, we'll answer it. It might not be right when we're talking. It might be at the end. Julie has given me permission to intuit when the best time to answer the questions are. So we'll just kind of go with the flow. I think that's it. We can, at the end, if there's time, I can unmute some people if you raise your hands, but we'll do that at the end, okay? So I think I've gone over everything. If you have a question, like I said, put it in the Q&A box. And I've been referring to Julie, so you know me now. I now have the pleasure of introducing our guest presenter this morning. I've had the opportunity to get to know Julie and learn a lot of great things, and we've forged this new friendship. So I'm really excited to be able to introduce her today. Julie Rogers is the founder and director of TLC Transitional Life Care, tlcserves.org, an end-of-life education and support nonprofit program in the Vajrayana Buddhist tradition. She currently hosts Buddhist teachings and death and dying presentations on Zoom and leads workshops, support groups, and a Buddhist practice group. Julie is also a poet, writer, and author. You can find her at www.julrogers.com. She also teaches creative writing for elders through Litquake. Is that how you say it? Mm-hmm. A San Francisco Bay Area literary organization. TLC's end-of-life manual, instructions for the transitional state, can be found at www.vimalatreasures.org. And just to let you know, I'm going to give you guys all those. I know I read it, but when I do a wrap-up, thank you. Any link or any resources that we refer to today. So, having said all that, welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Brenda. It's really good to be here. And it's very kind of serendipity, I think, that we met and have become friends, are becoming friends. And Brenda has already participated in one of our deep chat talk groups. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. And I'm looking forward to this talk.
Me too. Well, let's get started then, because I have a question to get us going. You know, I've found that those that enter this end of life work do so usually because of an experience or an event that greatly impacted them. I know that's what happened with me and why I'm sitting in this chair today. So, Julie, what called you to make end of life part of your life's work and mission?
Well, part of it has to do with the particular Buddhist practice that I've been doing for quite a long time, about 35 years or so. And really, it's because I guess I was in my 30s, many of my friends in the Buddhist community were dying of cancer, all of them under the age of 40. I lost friends, at least one a year for several years. And this was very alarming. You know, I'd had my grandparents die and, you know, people intermittently through life, but this was uncanny. And I felt like we didn't have anything in place to benefit people when they're going through this and to support them. And not that the community didn't come together to help, but there wasn't anything organized. And I felt like that was really important and needed. So I mentioned it to my Buddhist teacher, Venerable Galtrul Rinpoche. And he turned to me and he commanded me to begin the program myself. Because my idea was, well, why don't we do this? And I can help move chairs and, you know, and do registration or something. So then I was completely bowled over by the idea and procrastinated successfully for many years about starting it because I thought this is such a heavy, intense thing, you know. But then I just started to see that somebody, at least for our small community, needed to do something about this. Since that time, there have been all kinds of end of life programs starting. Of course, the Zen Hospice is very famous. And, you know, I still felt I needed to do it. And I had a very dear friend, Laurel Hansen, and she and I decided to do this together. And she encouraged me. We took hospice and bereavement training together at Ashland Community Hospital in Oregon and started doing the initial planning for it. And then my life changed radically and I met my husband and moved to the Bay Area and all these very unexpected things happened, which was part of my procrastination probably. and then Laurel died. She got pancreatic cancer and within 4 months she was gone. And that was the final shock. And then my husband got liver cancer. So it was at that time that I thought, okay, this needs to happen. A friend of mine, Ian Villarreal, helped me he did all the footwork for the nonprofit status. And then we started to have these events. And they were at, and have been at Orgyen Dorje Den Temple in Alameda, California, which is a big, beautiful Buddhist temple right across from the Elks Club and the police department in Alameda. And a beautiful and perfect venue for this. And up until COVID-19 hit, we were having regular events there. So now we're all on Zoom. But it was just the series of deaths by, you know, people that were young, people my age. And of course, those folks weren't prepared in any sense. So it's like, how do we prepare ourselves? And the manual, actually, that was initiated because a really dear friend of mine died of cancer in San Francisco. I guess it was in the late 80s during the AIDS epidemic. And my friend, his partner, said, what do we do? we were all Buddhists. We didn't know what to do. What do we do? And can you please go ask our teacher? So I did. And that started the manual. And over the years, it grew and grew and grew after taking hospice and bereavement training and doing a lot of study. And hopefully, I'm hoping that this winter I'll revise it because I've learned so much in the process of being the director of the program. We've had so many great, great guest speakers, Buddhist teachers, secular professionals, medical professionals, doctors, hospice workers, So it's been a really well-rounded education. So that's, I guess in a nutshell, that's probably why. And also, I just have a leaning toward this, and I can't explain that. I don't know why.
It's your call, right? It's that call you hear in the quiet of the night.
I mean, I remember when my friend Rob had just died, and this was in the late 80s. And my friend, his partner, was on the phone with our teacher getting instruction. What do we do next? And Rinpoche asked, is Julie there? And my friend said, yes. He goes, oh, good. So this was 30 years ago.
Wow.
And I just feel like, what did he have up his sleeve? Or what did he know? I don't know. And that sounds a little, woo-woo, but really, I feel like it's kind of something that people come to because they have a propensity for it. And if you don't know you have it, like I didn't have any clue that I would be doing this, no one would ever have convinced me I'd be doing this when I was younger. But there's a need.
There is, and I can so identify with what you're saying because I experienced a lot of loss when I was young. I lost my best friend at 17. I lost another best friend at 21. I lost a cousin when he was 34. And I was so, how shall we say this, anti-death. It was not going to happen to anybody I loved. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm never going to another funeral again, ever, ever, ever. And to see me today, my family's like, what happened here? So like you said, I think I was being prepared when I was younger. I resisted it, but it's always been a part of life that has called me. And some have heard my story and I won't go into it, but when my 34-year-old cousin did pass away, he opened my eyes. He's like, this is what life is about as he's dying. And I'm like, wait a minute, so yeah, it's that something speaking to us, right? That through our life, we get in these different situations that help direct us, right? That's what I'm hearing from you as well.
And one thing that I've thought about a lot is I heard or read somewhere that Mother Teresa, when asked what the most where the most impoverished country in the world is, she said the United States. The spiritual poverty in the United States is profound. And I think, we'll probably talk about this later, but I thought about that a lot because I thought if you were going to do some sort of volunteer work or something that you would want to do to benefit others, I worked with developmentally disabled adults when I was younger and did different things. But I really feel like the whole arena of death and dying has been, we've been very uneducated about it. Mm-hmm. It's been hidden from us. It's the most important thing that happens after birth, the way that we die and the way that we leave this world in a lot of ways. And we don't understand it, and we need to have help and support through that. And so that was kind of, that was a big pull, even though I really don't, I always consider myself an amateur of everything, but I just felt like if I can do something, that would be really good. And if we can bring in some other friends to do it with us, that would be even better,
So great.
So
great. Yeah. And that's why the conference is called It's Time. One of my board members, we were trying to say, okay, what are we going to call this conference? And you're always trying to find something maybe glitzy or grabby. And she just literally said, it's time. It's time. And we all went, oh, you're right. Because it is. It
Yeah.
is. We can't run from this anymore, and we need to talk about it. So one of the reasons actually I reached out to you is we wanted to learn a little bit about Buddhist teachings concerning end of life. So can you share a little bit more about the how the Buddhist teachings value the importance of end of life and how it impacts how we live?
Um, well, in my education as a Vajrayana Buddhist practitioner, uh, and in other as well, I'm sure in the Mahayana tradition, I'm not going to get into all of that, but a main foundational teaching is the four thoughts that turn the mind, and those are have to do with the preciousness of our birth, called the precious human rebirth, the truth of impermanence, the belief or the understanding or the respect of karma or cause and result, and then suffering. Those four things. So when you do the preliminary practices that precede all other practices in this tradition of Buddhism, you contemplate those every single day. And optimally, you contemplate them for the rest of your life. Impermanence is the motivator, because when you really think about that, you see that you have only so much time here, and what are you going to do with it, and how are you going to work with your own mind and learn to prepare yourself and also open our hearts so that we can be of benefit and use in the world, you know? So I think those four things and many other contemplations lead us to see that our state of mind is the thing that really brings us through life and to our death. And so our lives, we have this opportunity to practice, to learn how to meditate, to calm the mind, to open the heart, to put others first, you know, all these kinds of things. And because we're so habitual as beings, whatever we do a lot is how we're going to think. Everything we think is what we're going to do, and the things that we do in our activity are going to impact the way that we view the world. So everything that we do and everything that we think is what carries us to the end of our lives. And at the end of life, it's of utmost importance to have a calm mind and an open heart. So this is training. Our lives are training for this. You know, and in Buddhism, in the tradition that I grew up with, basically, the end of life is the pivotal moment when the opportunity to come to realization is there. In Buddhism, it's considered that yes, you know, we make a great deal of progress in life, and there are beings that are enlightened in this lifetime. Most of us, like myself, very ordinary person, you know, what I can do is I can practice, I can purify my thoughts and my mind so that I'm, you know, available to people and am not fixated on myself and self-absorbed, you know, and able to be of use when the opportunity arises, and also to develop my understanding and my clarity of mind, and meditation helps with that. I mean, it's really important to die calm, at peace. I mean, every hospice worker knows this. You know, the more peaceful the situation is, the more supported the person is, the more acceptance they have about their death, the better the death. And after death, you know, Buddhists certainly don't believe it ends when you die. There's a lot more to come. And so we're really setting the stage for our future lifetime and our ability to benefit others in this very life. You know, so it's an ongoing process. I think. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I've answered your question. We certainly don't want to be afraid when we're dying. And in order to master fear, that takes a great deal of practice, meditative
Right.
practice.
So that's what I'm hearing. One of the most important tenets of Buddhism is the practice, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
very important. It's a way of life, really. It's not that you sit down on the cushion and
right.
do what you do, and then you get up and you go about your business, and you forget what it is that you were contemplating on the cushion. You know, it's a way of living so that you make yourself available. That's how I think of it. I think of it as the path of responsibility.
I like that.
You know, when you take refuge in Buddhism, it's called taking refuge. You are taking on the world. You're promising to benefit others for the rest of your life in whatever way you are able to do. That's one of the parts of it, called the Bodhisattva vow. And it's entirely about benefiting others and not to exclude oneself. You know, we are one of the sentient
Right.
beings. You know, I don't feel like you know, I'm not a lama, so I don't know that I should go on too much about this, but I just feel there are many, many practices. In fact, every practice in Buddhism really does prepare you for death because it's mind training. You're training your mind and you're opening your heart all along the way. So you can't really go wrong. And anyone who meditates regularly will tell you, you know, how much it benefits them. There's been scientific studies done on Buddhist monks, you know, with having tests done while they're meditating and how the pathways in the brain actually can change. It's quite profound. But in terms of end of life, Buddhist practices really support during life, at the end of life, and afterward. So it's very interesting and very it's a very heart opening path.
So let me recap what's going around in my head and see if I have this right. So we're born, we come into this existence, and in the Buddhist value teachings, you know, the way we live, it's not like we're saying, okay, I'm going to do all this so I'm ready when I die. It's more, I'm living this way into the world. So then when it's time for me to exit this world, I do so as calmly, joyfully, peacefully as I can. Right. So it's, yes, we're planning for the end of life, but it's not like, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it's like you said, it's a way of living in between that gives you the joy, that gives you the peace, that gives you the mindfulness. So your life is fuller. So when the end comes for your next journey, you're ready instead of just race, 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 hit the wall. Uh-oh, I'm done. And I'm gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. There are practices that specifically prepare you for death in Buddhism. It's not, it's both. It's everything. You know, one of the main points that makes sense to me is the practices that I've been aware of help cut through self-grasping. Is what it's referred to as the fixation on self, because that causes the suffering. You know, if your whole thing is about me, 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 what do I want? What can I get? You know, I mean, our culture tends to lean in that direction a bit. This is about cutting through any obstacles to being a whole, loving, you know, altruistic being in the world. And the less we are, it's not that we're not concerned for ourselves. It's not that we don't take care of ourselves. It's that we can focus on helping others and being a healthy, balanced human being, so that when you go into the world, you're going to be a benefit to it instead of another weight on it. You know, I don't know if I'm explaining this very well.
No, you are, because that's what's kind of been running through my head as well, as, our interdependence. We're all
Very much interdependent. Yes.
So what I do for you, I do for me. What I do for me, I do for you, or impacts, let's say. So even the way I live, even if I don't go out and save the world and do something greatly, spectacular, the way I live impacts the rest of humanity in some way.
Well, every person that becomes healthier and wholer and more aware is going to have a positive influence on the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way around that. And when you consider that we are all interdependent and we are a whole unit, if you can step way back, and get perspective, the whole world, everything depends on everything else. And we're really seeing that, for instance, now with the global warming and the ecological disasters going on, how everything affects everything else. So that's why I've always thought of Buddhism as the path of responsibility, because first you're taking responsibility for yourself. Mm-hmm. And then you're taking responsibility for trying to help others. And the whole aspiration to be realized is to benefit others. It's not about personal enrichment or, I want to get out of this suffering place and be free of it. Well, of course you do, but you're not going to do it by yourself. Your motivation is to benefit other people to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And then we can't really truly help other folks and beings. It's not just about human beings. Mm-hmm. Until we have a sense of wholeness and awareness in ourselves. Right. So the practices all support that, support the wholeness and the loving kindness and compassion that human beings innately have. Everyone has this. We just want to develop it, right. Everyone. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, no, can you
feel really bashful talking about that.
Not just you and me chatting. So can you talk a little bit more about impermanence when it comes to the teachings of impermanence and how it might relate to end of life? Well, I mean, we make the jump easily, but some people don't.
Yeah, end of life is like the most perfect example of impermanence there is. Aging, oh my God. I did not look like this 30 years ago. I did not feel like this even 10 years ago. My body's doing what bodies do. Impermanence is everywhere. I mean, day and night, that's impermanence. Mm-hmm. The sun comes up, the sun goes down. The tree blossoms, all the leaves fall. Mm-hmm. A baby is born 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, that baby dies. Or the baby dies right after it's born. It's absolutely the foundation of existence is impermanence. There are good things about impermanence. Toothaches stop hurting. I won't always be this broke, maybe. But the awareness of that really helps us step back and reassess the value of our lives, because they are impermanent. And like our deep chat program, TLCs, it's not a support group for end of life. It's a support group for dealing with impermanence, which means no one's excluded, because everyone experiences this. And we, unfortunately, in the ways that we are brought up in this culture particularly, this is not something that's pointed out. You know, we grew up with the idea that we're going to improve ourselves and we're going to be educated, hopefully establish ourselves and have a home and a family and, you know, have a good time, hopefully accomplish some sort of meaningful work and take vacations and have a nice car and all of these things. And those things are all legitimate, but there's a big missing piece because none of those things will last.
Right.
So it's like, well, what's my motivation in life if everything I'm working for is impermanent?
You know what I was just thinking too, you know how even with my adult children, especially one of them, if I bring up this, he's like, yes, yes, mom, I know. I don't want to talk about death. It's almost like if we talk about end of life or death, it's going to happen. But what if we just talked about impermanence? It doesn't seem to be quite the same charge, but it really is the same thing, right?
It's all pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, you know, I understand not wanting to talk about end of life with your parents because you're afraid of losing them and all the grief. And we don't talk about grief either. Grief is even more forbidden.
Yeah.
You know, forbidden, which is ridiculous. Everybody goes through grief in their life.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way around it unless you're just not ever going to be attached or wanting anything, which isn't human. It's not human nature.
Right.
You know, maybe some realized beings have that view, but that's through a great development of awareness about partially about impermanence. But that's a whole other subject.
But it's so interwoven, though. You know, I am thinking about our society, everything. You turn on the television, you open a magazine, you go out in the world, and everything is about making things stay the same, whether it's our body, whether it's our age, anything to stave off the end. And that's total attachment and the acknowledgement, not being able to acknowledge that there's a cycle.
Well, and, you know, the things that we are so attached to, not only are they impermanent, but we don't really have them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're attached to a very unstable situation because of impermanence. You know, and I'm not faulting. I'm the same. I'm exactly the same. But the need and longing to feel secure in an insecure world causes a great deal of anxiety. And just being aware of the impermanence of it can help alleviate some of that, I think. And if our focus is always on what we can have and our comforts, we're missing part of the really big point. And when we do get to the end of our lives, we are going to be completely taken by surprise. And we don't know when that's going to happen. That's the thing that really got me about having so many of my friends die when they were young. Nobody thought that was going to happen. That it doesn't happen to me. It won't happen to me. That kind of attitude. We don't know that. And it's not to have like a doomsday view of life, but it's more about taking stock and rethinking our priorities, and maybe spending some time, you know, doing some, whatever it is, some sort of spiritual or beneficial activity where we give ourselves instead of wanting so much. You know, I think it's helpful to people. The more, I don't know, but there have been studies actually about people who have like chronic illness and they start doing volunteer work and they start getting better. Have you heard of this? Yeah, I think when we are able to give, and people in the end of life arena know this, because why else would we be doing this work? This is hard work, but there's an incredible fulfillment in it.
Mhm.
And why is that? Well, you're really benefiting somebody, even if it's just talking to them, because they're in pain and you can help them. That itself is a deeply satisfying and enriching thing. And that kind of activity really does cut through some of this, you know, self-absorption that human beings naturally seem to have. And I think helping people approach the end of life and even being like willing to talk about it is a leap for many of us. And that's why organizations like yours and the one that we're doing are so needed, because here's some people that are actually willing to talk about this.
Right.
And it helps alleviate the fear, because the fear is about, it's so forbidden and so taboo. You don't go there at all. And then what happens is there's a lot of really built up anxiety and misunderstanding about what the end of life is and what life is, in fact. So, yeah, I think it's important that we talk.
Yeah, no, I do too. And what I'm thinking about is when my parents lived down in Mexico, um, totally different traditions. They lived out in a village. And when somebody died, and many times they lost young people down there while my folks were there. And then they would lay them out in the kitchen on the table. People would come by for several days, and then they would take the body in the back of a pickup up to the local little cemetery they had. And there was rituals around it. There was keening around it. There was all sorts of things, but it was in the home. You come here, and quite honestly, most haven't been around somebody who's died. Not most, but many have. It hasn't been near them. And if they are, the body's whisked away, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but whisked away, and then it's removed. The next time you see it, the body might already be in an urn or maybe in a sealed casket or whatever. So that separation for us here. And so that's why I agree with you, the talking. I've had friends say, well, I couldn't volunteer. I couldn't do that. And I said, that's okay. Can we talk about it? Can we hold sacred space when somebody else needs to talk about it? That's a big practice too.
Mm-hmm. It is. Well, like in the US, especially from what I can tell, first of all, there's the denial of aging and death. I mean, the denial of aging is prominent. Everything is, the whole culture stresses youth, appearances, looking good. I mean, the industry of cosmetic surgery is huge because we're afraid to die. We expect people to look a certain way and to be attractive. And that whole view, it undermines our culture because the elders actually have a great deal to offer. Mm-hmm. And in every indigenous culture and throughout history, the elders were to be respected. This culture doesn't really do that so much, not in the same way.
Right.
And so that, and coupled with just fear of death and what, like you're saying, the lack of conversation about it. And then there's the funeral industry, which is a whole topic. It's removed death from life. Mm-hmm. And I know not even that long ago, like you're saying, not just in Mexico, but here in the United States, when someone died, their body would be at home. There would be services or rituals or prayers or whatever their spiritual or religious affiliation is. The minister or the priest or whomever would come in, and all of this not only benefits the person dying, but it benefits those left behind.
Yeah.
And it allows closure, and it keeps the death with the family instead of in a building, in a box, sealed away and hidden. And I think that a lot of the problems that people have in our culture with unresolved grief, which causes all manner of medical issues, psychological issues, are because people aren't given the chance to grieve properly. And the grief is rejected, you know, because people are so unaware of what that really means until it happens to you.
Right. Well, the last segment of this four-part series or conference is going to be from Heidi Bouchard, who talks about bringing us back to the parlor. But with what we're talking about too, I was thinking, going back to Buddhism, I'm not a Buddhist, but I have friends that are. And I'm imagining that there are quite a few that are watching this that may either be Buddhist, have a Buddhist loved one, or someone. So I'm wondering if there are things that we can do in preparation to offer loving compassion at end of life, especially in the Buddhist tradition.
Well, it depends on what you're meaning specifically, but if you're talking about, are you saying that, you know, for instance, maybe I find out that someone close to me is been diagnosed with a terminal illness. What can I do to help them? Well, first of all, be willing to go and sit with them and talk and listen. Listening is even more important than talking. And if someone's close to death, there are various things that can be done. Not to push our manual, but in this manual, instructions for the transitional state, this is all outlined very concisely, things that you can do. There are different Buddhist practices that are traditional, such as freeing beings, which is a little tricky just because of the situation in terms of city and county and state ordinances, but it's a popular, in Tibet, for instance, because Vajrayana is considered Tibetan Buddhism. It was a very beneficial thing to, for instance, release beings or purchase animals that were going to slaughter and then raise them and take care of them the rest of their lives, or allow them to be freed on the plateau or what have you, and dedicate the merit of that act to the person who's dying. So that's one thing. Of course, there are prayers and different rituals that can be done. In the home, it's always most important to make sure the person who's ill is in an environment that's supportive of their practice or whatever it is that they hold dear. A really calm environment. These ideas are not specific to Buddhists, because any tradition or no tradition, you know, maybe a person doesn't have a spiritual path in their life, but they love music or they love to be outdoors. So you try to arrange situations where they can be in those environments that bring them the most calm. And it's also good for people to be able to talk to their loved ones for closure. And it's also advised not to bring in people that have conflicts. Hopefully we will work these things out before we get to that point in our lives. Waiting till the last minute is never a good idea. And so I think anything almost on the outer level that I would say about this are things that the hospice community are very much aware of already. You know, it's common sense. And you can also do things like sponsor different practices to be done. You can, really importantly, is ask the person who's dying, what would they want? Right. A lot of times what happens is someone's really ill or on the verge of death and people act like they're already gone.
Right.
And they're not. They're very much alive and they very much have feelings and needs. And we need to learn how to listen, how to ask the right questions and how to listen to them so that they can let us know what their needs are. But really, really important, as you know, is to get your end of life paperwork together well ahead of time. And this is something that we stress in our nonprofit TLC, because you might have all kinds of aspirations for your spiritual practice and so on, but nobody knows what's going to happen or how it's going to happen. And if you don't have your advance directives and maybe a legacy letter or a spiritual will written, you don't know what could happen.
Right.
If you haven't written things down, if you don't have an advocate lined up, if you don't have these things documented, and sometimes it's even good to have them notarized, because families don't understand what we want. And it's the most difficult time for family. It brings
Right.
out all the skeletons come out of the closet when death happens, because no one's ever talked generally about this.
Mm-hmm.
So it can really be a mess. And I've seen it, you know, and in my own life. So it's really important to talk to your family, to write down your requests, to complete your will. And these things are actually kind of amazing contemplations. If you do them before you're sick, it's not like there's a threat that anything is going to happen. You know, this is not going to tip the tip the bucket. But what it's going to do, it provides this great and unique opportunity to contemplate one's life and to deeply consider what has been important to you, the people, thinking about the people that you love. And another thing that's important is to try to lighten your load before you get there. We are accumulators. We have so much stuff. It's really not a very nice thing to die and leave a huge mess for somebody else to clean up when they're in the process of grieving. So it's good to give your things away. I mean, this is a Buddhist tradition. When people get older or they learn that they're ill, they give away everything. They give it to their families, they give it to the community. And this is a great thing to do, especially now there's so many people in need right now. So there are various things to do that are helpful. The paperwork is so important. Knowing who you want to come be with you.
Yeah.
Writing down a list of those people and phone numbers. Having somebody that you trust that can help be an advocate. You know, all these things, we can put them in order and still we don't know what's going to happen. But the process of doing it is very, very meaningful. When I wrote my
as well, yeah.
When I wrote my will, which I now have to change because my husband died and things changed, I spent 3 solid days writing it. And it was a really pivotal experience. I just hadn't thought about all of that before. And it really meant a lot to me. And it wasn't scary and awful. It was penetrating and meaningful. And so I do really suggest that.
So one thing though, I am wondering, more specific to Buddhism, so I understand the culture a little bit better. So Julie, it's the end of your life and I'm your friend. What can I do to support what you need at end of life, above or beyond what we've just talked about? Because that can be applicable to just about everyone. But is there something specific in the Buddhist tradition that I can support? Or expect to see or expect to experience? I don't know.
Well, I would probably like it. I would like it if someone came and helped me by practicing with me, by doing the practice that I do with me. Of course, I can do that by myself, but having the right situation and atmosphere for that is important. I suppose it depends on how ill one is. You know, if you're unable to really take care of yourself at that point, I would like support and practice more than anything, really. That's me.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to see my family. I would want to be with my family. I would want definitely to see, if not my own personal spiritual teacher, somebody that I trust and can look to for support and guidance at the end of my life. I would probably appreciate having some sort of practices being done. And there are places, even online, where you can sponsor practices for all manner of different things going on, including end of life. You can go online and you can, within a day, sponsor a whole monastery to do practices for somebody who's dying. It's very simple. Or sick, or has some other kind of obstacle. But mainly, I think I'd just like to make sure that everything is in place and that somebody would be there to do practices for me after I've passed.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I'd also probably want to make sure that I'm leaving everything I can to those who need it. You know, furniture, clothing, what have you. It's really hard to take care of all of those things after you've lost somebody that you love. When my husband died, I had to take care of everything just about on my own. His family did help with some things, they took some things, but going through the closet and taking all of his clothes out and putting them in bags and taking them to the Goodwill was unbelievably difficult. And I did it by myself. So it would be really nice to know that there was somebody helping your people with the after effects, but better yet, to try to take care of them before you go.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just so painful to do that. And all through my life, I've heard people say things like, "Oh, I don't need to worry about that. I'll be dead. They can take care of that." I don't find that a very compassionate point of view. Right. The people that love you are suffering intensely. And so everything that we can do to set it up so that when we're gone, there's as little to deal with as possible. I'm embarrassed to say right now, I have more than 2 storage units. It's not just my things, it's my family's things, and it's my husband's things, my late husband's things. And now it's COVID-19, and I can't really get help over here, and I've gotten older and I have arthritis and so on. And it's like, how am I going to take care of this? How am I going to get this stuff out of here? I really don't want to leave a big load of things, I mean, I could live a lot longer or not. There's no way to know. So I kind of have that in mind. I just like to leave as with the least imprint as possible.
That's a good reminder for all of us. Absolutely. Well, one thing I do want to make sure that we have time to talk about as well is to hear a little bit more about TLC and the resources you make available on the website. Talk a little bit about that. And then maybe you can share a little bit more about how, if people are drawn to this, how they can support your mission.
Well, thank you. Well, we're really still not a large nonprofit, and it's been a very kind of grassroots, gradual development. TLC Transitional Life Care was founded in 2014. And initially, the idea was to just provide support for people who are dying, and not just in the Buddhist community, but, starting there because we saw the need for it. And so I thought, we'll just have like a group of people that when someone's dying, we'll be able to go to the home and sit with them and support them in their practice and help the family make arrangements for a teacher to come or somebody, to say prayers and, things like that. But then I realized nobody knows how to do that. And so I thought, well, what we need actually is an educational program,
Mhm.
because we need to be educated about this before we can effectively enact these things, embody this idea or this aspiration. So we started having events, and so we've had, we're about to have our 40th event since 2015. And when COVID-19 started, we just had to scurry around. We could not believe it. None of us had ever even been a Zoom host. I mean, we didn't have a lot of tech abilities. I have none, basically. I've had to learn everything from scratch, and I'm still not that good at it. But we had to learn how to bring everything online. It took us about 3 months, but we built a new website, which offers many resources, and will continue to, put more and more resources there. We learned how to do Zoom. We're now having monthly programs on Zoom, which is more than we've ever done. It's twice as much as we've ever done. And we started, I guess, a year or longer ago, this program, Deep Chat. We have 3 of those going, and they're on Zoom, which is very fortunate because now we can reach people from distant, in the distance that we couldn't before. And the Deep Chat program it's a talk group for people to discuss and support each other in order to deal with the ongoing impermanence in our daily lives. And that includes everything. We've discussed, of course, end of life. We have a group in Ashland, Oregon, or in the Rogue Valley, Southern Oregon. We have one that springs out of San Francisco, and we have another one in Sacramento. And we have gone all over the map with our conversations. Our group up in the Southern Oregon is together doing their paperwork. They decided they wanted to do that. Each group is small, no more than 10 people. And they've been incredibly supportive and helpful. So if, for instance, somebody has a death in their family, then they alert everybody in the group, and everybody does prayers for that person. We support the suffering of the loss. It's been wonderful. And in fact, we're about to talk about, and we don't usually get into politics per se, but we're about to have a group that's going to discuss how we can deal with our emotions surrounding the current situation in the United States in terms of the elections and so on, because people are so upset and worked up about this. And all of it is from a Buddhist view. So that just means that coming from a place of compassion and trying to stay clear-minded and have equanimity and understanding. So we have the Deep Chat, and then we also have what's called a Transitional State Forum. And I've been leading these for maybe 3 or 4 years, going into small groups and completely going step by step through our manual and talking about a whole gamut of different things that have to do with end of life, both from secular and Buddhist perspectives. And we did have a film series. We had 2 film series going on, but they have been now canceled because we can't have public gatherings.
Oh, yeah.
But we were showing films at Ashland Public Library and at Oregon Dorje Den Temple in Alameda, California, that have to do with end of life or spiritual support, supportive spiritual films. Those were free. The Deep Chat program is free. We're trying to do things just to offer. And then we've also done some assistance with memorials and then counsel, just talking, And it's just a handful of folks. We just got a couple of new volunteers. Volunteers are not easy to come by, we found.
Especially not now.
No. But I think, what I see is that this is slowly growing, and it's definitely having a positive impact. And that's great.
So what I've got a lot out of this today. Well, one, I've done your Deep participate in the deep chat, and I did find it really enriching. And as I think I told the group, I'm very selective now what groups I enter into so that I'm not spreading myself all over. I'm a joiner. So I'm practicing, discernment on that. It was really deep and I enjoyed it. And I was a stranger to all of them except for you. So it was really good. And you have lots of resources, which is helpful. And what I've gathered from our chatting this morning is all these Buddhist teachings and practices are really universal. We can all, whether you're a practicing Buddhist or you're not, we can still embody a lot of these practices for loving kindness, for showing up when we're needed. And I'm getting a little bit better understanding if I have Buddhist friends where they might be thinking on things that are important to them. So I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it, Buddhism is a huge path, and there are countless practices and different, ways to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
And most of it on a basic level is really common sense, common heart sense. I think anyone would appreciate the basic precepts or teachings of Buddhism. They really don't vary. In some ways, they're very parallel to other spiritual paths. Mm-hmm. Any compassion-based philosophy or religion or path has some of the similarities. And when it comes to approaching end of life, from simple to incredibly profound, you will find all of that in the Buddhist path. There's a lot that I wouldn't even begin to discuss here because I feel I'm not qualified to do so. But just simple things, trying to keep our hearts open, trying to put the other first, thinking of the other first. Examining what our motivations are. A lot of times things that we do in our lives, we don't perhaps think through about what the effects are going to be. And, cause and effect, which is called karma, is constantly happening. We're constantly, our lives, our actions, our speech, all of these things have effects. And it's really about being, that word, mindful. It's very popular now. But what does that really mean, And how do I want to affect others? And of course, we all have our foibles and faults. But focusing on being positive and helpful and kind, and thoughtful, that's no different from any of the major religions, really. And you don't have to have a religion to do those things. It's about being kind-hearted. Mm-hmm. And preparing for the end of life. I'm sure that the hospice embraces many of the things that Buddhism would as well. And a lot of it has to do with how you think about it, the view of your motivations and so on. And like I said, the manual that we have really maps this out. I think that hospice workers would appreciate the humor in this, but when I was writing it, I asked a teacher I know, I said, well, what do you think about this title? Dying for Dummies. He laughed, he goes, I don't think so. I said, me neither, but I thought it would. It's kind of, when I was working with the hospice in Ashland, Oregon, I appreciated those folks so much. And one thing I can say, they had the best senses of humor. It's really a survival mechanism.
Well, it's actually it's a part of life, right? Just because we're talking end of life, it is serious, but humor is a way to move through life as well. So Julie, thank you so much for this time. You know, we've talked on the phone before and we could probably talk forever. And I want to thank you for your time this morning, sharing your heart, sharing some of your practices, and letting us a little bit into your world and your organization. I'm hoping that it sparks something in others and it speaks to them. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Brenda. And, you know, everyone's welcome. We're having another event this Saturday, perfect for Halloween. People are completely encouraged to just put your toe in the water and see what you think. We have a variety of topics that are discussed. And starting in November, we're going to have, for the first time, a series of classes, 6 months, once a month, on meditation with a really, really wonderful teacher that we've had teach with, you know, for us before, Kimpo Paujor-Gatso. He's terrific. He speaks English, so he's going to have a very, very wonderful translator with him. And these will be 2 hours once a month on a Saturday afternoon. And he's going to teach very basic to more advanced meditation techniques. I'm very excited about this. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and you'll find all the information there. It's at tlcserves.org.
Yeah, and I'll send that out to everybody. Well, thank you, Julie. And you can't disappear. I told you you need to stay on for our second segment here.
Sure.
So Julie has offered to help me out because our next guest was to be Patty Burgess with Teaching Transitions. And I say was because life happened where end of life has come to the forefront of her family. And Patty has said that I can share a little bit of her story with you because it really underscores the importance of having these conversations before we pass away and making it part of our culture. So she had a younger, not super young, but a younger nephew, was injured critically and on life support. And so the family has been at the hospital. And of course, Patty's been in the midst of it, making some tough decisions and having conversations. And some of them are for the first time. So she was still going to come here. And I'm like, yeah, no, we can do this, Patty. You need to be with your family. But she really wants to stress just exactly what Julie was saying and what we've been talking about, how important end of life and talking about dying should be held while we're living, so that when we get to these situations that happen, there's nothing's going to take the rough edges off. Nothing's going to make it where there's not some pain involved, but it will make it a lot easier in making decisions. One of the graphics that she sent me, she said, this will explain it all to you. And I was going to pop it up, but I don't want to mess with technology. I'm not trusting it this morning. But it is of a patient on a bed with their spirit or soul rising above, as if, you know, they're transitioning, and then ropes holding and being pulled down by the family there. Mm-hmm. So I want to share a little bit of my experience, and then I'm going to ask Julie to help us with something. That picture alone has helped me, and I started a practice that I wanted to share with you, and some may have something similar, but it's meditating on death. And I do it almost every day. And I picture my husband. We'll have been married 40 years next year. And I picture him dying on his deathbed and then gone. He jokes when I tell him, he goes, why do you always picture me? You. Well, I do, me too, but sorry, Nick. But I do, so that, because I know one day he's not going to be here, or I'm not going to be here, but I'm not promised any time. How does this help me? When those little irritants in life, and being married 40 years, there's lots of them, pop up, they're not that important. They're just literally not that important. And when he walks out the door, and some of you who know me that are on the call or are going to watch this know, we live in a divided household politically. we could allow that to affect our life really bad or our love, and we don't. And one of the ways I'm able to do it is because of that meditation. I think about what would my life be if he wasn't here? Just as my 4-year-old grandson, he'll want to come play. And I'm like, oh, I have 100 things to do. I have all these things to do. And then I think, no, he wants to come over and play Play-Doh. That's his thing right now. Play-Doh with his grandma. And I am only promised that moment in time playing Play-Doh with him. I'm not promised any future time with him. So I try to really be present. He doesn't let me do anything else. If I even look at the phone, he's like, he calls me Ema, no phone, Play-Doh. But that moment is precious because I know I'm not promised anything further. So I do the same, with my adult children and my other grandchild. And it just brings me to the present so I can fully be with them as much as I can. And so it's something that I practice so that I have more loving kindness. And I do it, like I said, I picture my own death. I've sat and I've thought about what it's going to be like to think about possibly not being here when the grandchildren graduate from school or get married or start their lives. My mom is older, and I do this with her because she's probably going to watch this. So sorry, Mom. She can drive me insane. But then when I sit and I think about her not being here or not hearing her voice, then again, it makes me more present. And then I can ask questions too. I'm more prepared to ask her, what is it that you want, Mom? And we've had these conversations. And these aren't conversations we had with my dad when he died 4 years ago. But I do want to do this mindfully with my mom. So I encourage you, it doesn't have to be this, it can be anything. It could be meditating on impermanence, watching a leaf blossom, bloom, come out in spring, and then fall away and crumble up in the fall. But practice that letting go and that kind of non-attachment as much as we can. So in thinking about that, and knowing that Patty wasn't going to be here, I went digging through my files and I pulled up something on mindful death, and I just want to read a few things from it. And I'm really sorry. It's one of those things I copied, excuse me, and I don't know who to attribute it to. It's not good. Sorry, bear with me. American. Oh, this is not good. I'm going to lose my voice. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to fast track this over to Julie. I had read something about Tonglen, and I was wondering why I try to get my voice back. This never happens. So I don't want to go into signs or anything, but because I'm a talker. Julie, can you talk a little bit about Tonglen and how we can use that for end of life? And then, excuse me, because I'm going to go get some water.
Sure. Yeah, Brenda had said this morning before we started that she'd spontaneously opened this book, and there was some information about Tonglen, which is actually what I was thinking of talking about at the end of our program today. So I've got some excerpts from different writings that I'd like to read to you. And then at the end, a very, very short little guided meditation with just some sitting and breathing so that we can practice this very, very simple technique. Tonglen, or sending and receiving practice, is a foundational Buddhist meditation and contemplation that everyone can do at any time, anywhere, for anyone. It's as easy as breathing. The practice of Tonglen is done to develop our compassion and our ability to be present for our own suffering and the suffering of others. It's also a practice of great kindness that opens up our whole being to the overwhelming presence of suffering, and it supports our strength and willingness to transform it into compassion through the mercy of our energy, the energy of our mercy and openness. So the word tong, or the syllable tong, means sending out or letting go. Len means receiving or accepting. Tonglen is ordinarily practiced in sitting meditation using the breath. Simply, the practitioner breathes in all that is negative and harmful and breathes out all that is positive and helpful, taking on the suffering of other beings. By doing the practice, we begin to connect and open to our own being. Tonglen can be done for those who are ill, those who are dying or have died, or those who are in any kind of pain. It can be done as a formal meditation, or it can be done right on the spot. I've literally stood across the street from scenes where something was coming down that was really negative and just stood there and did this breathing. You can do it anywhere, anytime. You can do Tonglen for people who hurt you or hurt others. You just breathe in their pain and send them relief. About a year ago, TLC, our program, hosted an event about Tonglen at UCSF's Helen Diller Cancer Center, which is really wonderful. And one of UCSF's organizers asked why anyone with cancer would want to take on the suffering of others, and wondered, would that cause them to suffer more? So the Buddhist teacher that we brought in explained this to them, and no, actually not. And there's reasons for this. And I'd like to quote two very renowned and beloved Buddhist teachers that have gone way into the secular arena. One of them, Joan Halifax, which you may have heard of her, and the other, Pema Chodron. And these are their comments on Tonglen practice. The renowned American Zen Buddhist teacher, Joan Halifax, is also a hospice caregiver, an anthropologist, an ecologist, a civil rights activist, and author of several books on Buddhism and spirituality, including the book Being with Dying. She says this: Tonglen is one of the richest and bravest practices that we can do. In teaching this practice for over 25 years, I have been told again and again that this one practice has helped many people immeasurably in attending to their own fears around pain, suffering, dying, and loss, and has given them a real basis for the joining of compassion and equanimity. This is one of the great meditation jewels that offers a way for us to cultivate our natural mercy. What a lovely thing to say. And then the beloved Buddhist teacher, author, and nun, Pema Chodron, gives Tonglen instruction as well. And I'm paraphrasing her words here. She says, on the in-breath, take in the suffering of any particular area, group of people, country, or even one particular person. Maybe it's not the global situation. Maybe it's breathing in the physical discomfort and mental anguish of someone who's receiving chemotherapy. Of all the people who are undergoing chemotherapy, and if you've undergone chemotherapy and come out the other side, this is very real to you. And what I would like to add there is that breathing in the pain of others does not mean that you are personally adding that to your own load of pain. This practice is meant to purify or dissolve that pain through the way your heart opens when you do the practice. Here's another explanation from an online teaching. Tonglen practice, also known as taking and sending, reverses our usual logic of avoiding suffering and seeking pleasure. In Tonglen practice, we visualize taking in the pain of others with every in-breath and sending out whatever will benefit them on the out-breath. In this process, we become liberated from patterns of selfishness. So this practice actually transcends that self-other that we often, as human beings in the world, find ourselves rather than being together, but being separate. So this practice really brings us together with others. There are many variations and ways to practice Tonglen in the Buddhist tradition. And traditionally, it's included as a regular part of one's personal daily practice. We can touch into Tonglen in any situation that needs love and compassion. And how you do it is very, very simple. First, let's all do this together if you care to. First, make yourself comfortable in your seat. So just get yourself comfy. Allow your breathing to become even. You can close your eyes or you can have open eyes, either way. Now, focus and imagine an individual, a group of people, a community, or a nation, or the world. You can also start small with yourself and your own family, and eventually expand the reach of your intention to include every being. Visualize each exhalation as light that sends out happiness, such as love, kindness, well wishes, confidence, strength, and support. Then, with each inhalation, visualize a dark smoke that takes in and removes suffering from the object or objects of your compassion, such as fear, doubt, pain, obstacles, confusion, and sickness. As we continue to breathe in this way, we imagine offering all that is positive to others and taking in their own negativity, illness, suffering, or obstacles in order for them to be free of this. And this darkness is dissolved and purified in our hearts. So let's sit for a few minutes and just breathe with this visualization and open our hearts. Thank you, everyone. I hope that this has been helpful, and particularly this little practice of Tonglen, which is actually quite an expansive one, can be taken into any situation. It's really helpful when you're sitting at bedside with someone and it's not time to speak and you want to do something to help them. This actually is a benefit to everybody in the vicinity. It's a very positive, powerful, heart-opening exercise or practice, and it doesn't matter whether you have a spiritual affiliation or not, you can do this practice. And I really appreciate being here today. And Brenda, are you okay?
I think so. Something just passed through. That's what I say, it never happens. I'm a huge talker. Maybe that's the point. Julie, thank you so much, because also in addition to this beautiful practice, when somebody says, I want to help, I don't know what to do, this is a super easy one to say, maybe perhaps do this practice. The world can certainly use it coming up over this next week. I'd encourage all of us to do this. So thank you for sharing that, and for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful as ever to talk with you, and I'm sending all my best wishes to everyone who's listening.
Cool. Me too. So everybody, next up, November 5th, self-care, putting on our own oxygen mask first. So we'll be talking about self-compassion, which for me is kind of a missing link in this country in a lot of ways. So how can we take better care of ourselves? So I'll send out a reminding link again next week for those of you who have signed up. And I guess before we close off, because we're going to end a little early, does anybody have any specific questions for Julie? Because I haven't seen any. I've seen some wonderful comments in the chat box, which is great. Okay, so just as a reminder, I will send you links to Julie's website and things that were mentioned today. The booklet or the manual I have, it's wonderful. I really highly recommend it. Oh, we have a question. Let me get over to it. How do you spell the meditation?
How do you spell the Tonglen, the word Tonglen? It's Tonglen. Just the way it sounds. If you go online and you look up Tonglen, you will find a lot of information.
So let's go over here. Hold on real quick. I'm allowing Adrienne to talk. She has a question for you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Brenda. I do a practice called centering prayer, Julie, and and it's Christian meditation. Part of what I do when I'm practicing it is I visualize breathing in the light, quote unquote, the light, and then breathing out negativity. In other words, I'm trying to release what's in me.
Right.
Now, as you explained Tonglen, is it possible do you think, to connect the Tonglen practice to what I do? In other words, what I'm visualizing is making myself a conduit of breathing in the good and the positive and breathing out the good and the positive that I have just brought in, making myself a conduit. Does that make sense, or is it too crazy?
Well, you're asking a very ordinary person this profound question. So, but you know, I can't advise mixing practices. However, what you're suggesting sounds really wonderful, and if that works for you, I would not discourage you from doing it. I mean, the power of our minds and our aspirations to open our hearts is beyond our conception. I really think that. If you're breathing in positivity and you're breathing out positivity, how can you possibly go wrong?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted your quick comment on it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I mean, that's off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, any other questions for Julie before we sign off? And if you miss or you're watching this as a recording, when I send it out and you have a question, please send it to me because it'll give me an opportunity to call Julie and ask her some questions that I can share with you. So that is what we have for you today. Thank you for being in part 1. I'm looking forward to next week and seeing you all again. And thank you. Blessings.
Yeah, good fortune. Stay well, stay safe, stay sane. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.